Hello, this is Teens Talk Politics, and today I'm joined again by my co host Sam. And today we're going to be talking about the weekly news that has happened in the past 7 days. Anyways, I want to kick off with major news that came in yesterday. January 6th subpoenas have been released for several Trump officials. However, they are fighting legal cases against the subpoenas, so they don't have to go in front of the House committee that has been basically set apart from the rest of the House members by Nancy Pelosi. This would include a congressman from Mississippi, I do not remember his name, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and several other Democrats to work to investigate what happened on January 6th. And basically, the subpoenas would put a lot of Trump officials in front of this committee, and of course, without lying to Congress, which is illegal, they have to tell the truth of what happened in the White House and really why things ended up how they did on January 6th. And I think that's a very important thing for the country to understand what happened on especially a day like this when 7 people died, including several police officers, and then only one was it, I think it's just one rider, right? That was shot by a Capitol
hmm
police officer that was shooting someone that was trying to infiltrate the Capitol building, getting to members of Congress. And I think it's very important for people to understand that these subpoenas are going to help us understand what happened. And these legal cases that are basically blocking these Trump officials from testifying before Congress, it's going to slow down the process, obviously, and it's going to slow down how quickly we get answers on what happened on that day and how things turned out and why things turned out the way they did. There's also many right wing extremist leaders in certain groups like the Proud Boys and other right wing conspiracy theory groups that will have been subpoenaed to go before Congress. There are these people like this, these white right wing extremists, these the Trump administration officials that's going to help us find out what happened. And I think it's kind of honorable that we have a bipartisan commission. We've talked about this before in the show. We have Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Adam Kinzinger is a pretty moderate Republican, Liz Cheney, not so much. However, she did work with the Democrats in trying to track down certain people that were involved on January 6th, maybe possibly helped organize it, or like Trump himself, incite the riot that turned into January 6th. And I just think it's very important for the American people to understand what happened. And the subpoenas is a right step in the it's a good step in the right direction.
hmm Yeah, with these subpoenas, hopefully, I mean, albeit very slowly, the country will start moving along and get a better investigation of what went on in the Capitol on January 6th. Obviously, it's been an uphill battle for the January 6th Commission since the very beginning. As previously, we've talked about how difficult getting the right people on there would be, how we've talked about the struggle. But once these subpoenas start rolling in, and from people that were involved, or at least at the time of making this video, suspected to be involved in the Capitol riots, will be tried and we can finally move the country along. It's very important that we realize that these people should be held responsible, not just as American citizens trying to get their way, but as domestic terrorists. Anything but that is a lie, and we need to make sure that they are tried not as should make them tried as, albeit Americans and people of the country, but don't excuse them for what they did that cost 7 lives at the Capitol. And it's very important that these subpoenas come through, or else this will especially make a stand to the future generations of the United States that it's possible for these domestic terrorists to wiggle out of these legal battles that will possibly convict them of these crimes against the government.
Well, I think it's also very important to understand that there are so many people that have gotten away with going within the Capitol and haven't been arrested yet, or will never be arrested, will never be punished for their crimes, whether it's vandalism or just breaking and entering. Yes, you're going to have hundreds of people that have already been arrested, tried. Some people are still waiting to be tried. And for people to see, I have a chance. If I do a domestic terrorist act, and as long as I'm not caught on camera, I get away with it. It's kind of sad to see. I would hope at least a vast majority of the terrorists that were there on January 6th, the domestic terrorists, they would have been arrested and tried. But as far as the numbers go, there's rough estimates of how many people were there, but we don't actually know for a fact. There were thousands of people there at the least. Trump described it as like a million. Of course, that is a hyperbole. That was obviously not true, but there were a lot of people there. And there haven't been too many people that have been tried and convicted to go to prison for an extended period of time. Or maybe it's just a fine, or maybe it's community service hours. But there haven't been really, besides with a few exceptions, many major uh, people that have been tried and convicted to go to prison. There have been small penalties, like I mentioned, fines and community service. However, for the vast majority of them, especially people that vandalize the building, they have not been convicted. Either they had an attorney that said, oh, it's not my client's fault, it's President Trump's fault for inciting this riot, almost indoctrinating these my client, using propaganda to get my client to go vandalize the Capitol, go take over the Capitol for a temporary um, amount of time. And a lot of times these arguments work. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. And the people that get away with it think, okay, so I get away with a crime of basically just walking into the United States Capitol, vandalizing it, threatening hundreds and hundreds of people's lives that were within the Capitol, people that had status within the country, and you get away with it because your attorney was good enough, you paid enough money. Oh, I just had to pay a fine. Oh, I just had to do a few hours. It's more than a few, but a lot of community service hours, but never had to end up
Hmm.
in jail. And I think it's we
Well,
should go ahead and move on, but I just want to say for people that have been in the Capitol, they need to be tried and they need to be convicted because there's no excuse for what happened. Regardless of who's convicted at this point, Donald Trump incited it. He's never going to be held responsible, even though he should be. He was impeached
yep.
because of it, but never convicted. If you incite a riot on the entire United States Capitol, threatening hundreds of people that have major status in the government, wow, you should probably have been convicted during that impeachment trial. However, he was not because we have cowards within the United States Senate
Yeah, and to,
on the Republican side. Yes, we had 7 Republicans that voted with Democrats, but Mitch McConnell, cough, cough. We have people like that. Roy Blunt and several other Republicans within the Senate that could not, basically, they don't have neck. I mean, you've seen Mitch McConnell. He literally does not have a neck. And of course, metaphorically speaking, they don't have neck and they can't stick it out to do the right thing and to convict Trump. And of course, we're basically
mhm.
lingering on this because this happened several months ago, back in February. But it's really something
Yeah,
that should have happened. He should have been convicted.
and to summarize this and completely as we wrap up and move on to our next segment, it sets a dangerous precedent that the entirety of the United States government does not have enough power to convict these these terrorists and get them off on community service hours and minor fines. Either, especially the Democrats on the January 6th Commission, have got to do something to step up so that more incidents don't happen like this in the future, as you were saying about literal hiring someone to take over the government. So
Right. And I think if it's okay with you, we're going to move on to our next point, and this is a major battle within the Democrat Party up on Capitol Hill. And I do want to point out that lately we've been talking a lot about Republicans being split, and now it's more like the Democrats are being split. Previously, we have anti-Trump Republicans like Mitt Romney, like Susan Collins, not so much, but definitely Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and then versus Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, and several pro-Trump Republicans, and that split within the Republican Party. Now we have Kristen Sinema, Joe Manchin, and then the entire rest of the Democrat Party. It's a pretty big split because, yes, hundreds and hundreds of congressmen and women support this bill we're about to be talking about with that Joe Biden has tried to get through. He's campaigned on it, and it's going to be a major part of the Biden presidency if it does get passed. Everyone supports it except two people that hold so much power, and these are, of course, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema in the United States Senate that are refusing to
Mm-hmm.
budge. Basically, what's happening here is all we need is 50 votes in the House. I mean, in the Senate, sorry, because of something called reconciliation. Basically, what this does is it's really confusing because they have to like bend a bunch of rules. It's like a loophole within the system, and it goes along something like, okay, as long as it does with the budget, something like that, and there's certain things that you're not allowed to have with a reconciliation bill that has to pass the filibuster. However, using a reconciliation bill, you can basically bypass the filibuster, and that is what they're going to try to do on the Build Back Better bill that Joe Biden is trying to get passed to be a big foundation of what his agenda was built on. We'll talk about in a little later about how they're trying to do that for the debt ceiling as well, because Republicans are refusing to budge, and the filibuster, getting rid of the filibuster, doesn't seem to be an option for the debt ceiling crisis. Back to the Build Back Better plan, Manchin and Sinema are being very difficult. Really, they've met with the president several times to talk about a budget.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden wants $3.5 trillion. Yes, $3.5 trillion is a lot. But compared to what we spend seven and some $1 trillion on our defense budget, it's quite minor. Joe Manchin and Krista Sinema both say yes to the seven and some $1 trillion for the defense budget, but say no to the $3.5 trillion for the Build Back Better plan, which would help with healthcare, that would help with infrastructure, help with basically building back the foundations of the United States. Basically, what they're saying is they're refusing for $3.5 trillion, and they're really not giving us a major, really not a major foundation of what they would like. Biden says that he would move it down to 2 trillion, sorry, which is still a lot of money and a lot that could help the American people in this Build Back Better bill. However, Manchin and Sinema still do not want to spend $2 trillion, which is a than significantly less than that 3.5 trillion. Joe Manchin, on the other hand, we know that he wants $1.5 trillion in spending, but we don't know what Krista Sinema wants because she is being difficult and is not telling us, which doesn't really seem like she wants to get stuff done if she's not even putting up what she
Yep.
would like. There's not much of a compromise if you're not even going to tell people what they would like.
Yeah, and
So we don't know how to get Kristen Sinema on board if you're not going to tell us what you're willing to vote for.
yeah, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say this is what politics should be like. But when in a vital time for our nation, when rebuilding the foundations after a Black Lives Matter movement, a COVID-19 pandemic, and pain across the entirety of America, you're going to sit here and, especially to Krista Simna, you are just going to do nothing. And I see what you're trying to do, especially for Joe Manchin, trying to compromise and make both parties happy. You're not going to do that. You're just going to make both parties more unhappy. It's not helping in such a vital time in our nation that the these bills that need to be passed are being blocked by some people who are power hungry and want control. I'm obviously not claiming, oh my gosh, Joe Manchin is power hungry. I'm claiming that it's Joe Manchin needs to be a bigger man here, step up for the good of the country, find a way to work around it, and so that we can start rebuilding this country and forwarding Biden's agenda. That's just all there is to it.
Well, I would say Joe Manchin is less of a problem than Krista Sinema is.
Absolutely.
She's been here for about 3 years, so she's not new to Congress, but newer than Joe Manchin is, who has been here since 2011. Krista Sinema 2019, so that's actually 2 years. 2 years. And the thing with Manchin is he's had to compromise so many times on bills that Democrats wanted to do. They haven't been in control for very long. While Joe Manchin was in office, Democrats had the Senate for 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and then they lost it up until 2020 when we gained the Senate again. So Joe Manchin hasn't really had to compromise on much that he actually thought was going to get passed in a while. And Manchin is in these shoes that, okay, I hold so much power right now. And of course, we know he does because he is that 50th vote. He is that vote that gets Democrats across the finish line, making Kamala Harris make the tie making vote. And basically, what's happening here is Manchin is giving us the 1.5 trillion. Krista Sinema, like I said, is not giving us a 1.5 trillion spending proposal or any proposal at that. She has refused to tell anyone what she would want. We just know that she wants to spend less than 3.5 trillion, which is very broad. That's between 0 and 3.4, 3.5. Yeah. So that's a big open gray spot. And she just doesn't tell us what she wants. It's hard to compromise with someone that's not going to tell you what they want. Manchin has given us what he wants. Right there, that helps you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Democrats are going to go all the way down to 1.5. They could break it right in the middle, 1.75 trillion, and Manchin could possibly agree to that. But of course, he holds all the cards. If
Mm-hmm.
Manchin doesn't vote for it, it doesn't pass. He holds all the cards. So now you have this battle between moderates like Manchin and Sinema, with more progressive Democrats like Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. You have these major heads of the Democrat Party, the progressive wing versus the moderate wing. And this is where this divide becomes apparent. Joe Biden has already said he's had so many meetings, like I mentioned, with these two senators, Manchin and Sinema, but they're just being difficult, like I said. To have two senators that are just refusing to compromise doesn't help you. And
No.
if you saw what SNL did with these two characters, Joe Biden, Krista Sinema, Manchin, they were all being played by actors on SNL last Saturday, and they were basically poking fun at the fact that Manchin's, oh yes, I would love to spend on defense bills, but or the defense budget, sorry, but you know what? I don't want new bridges. I don't want to help infrastructure. I'll just watch those bridges fall. Of course, it's not actually what he thinks, but that's just a an extremist view of what he thinks. And I'm just thinking that yes, SNL has poked fun at political figures before, but you know you're doing something wrong when they particularly go after you. They particularly went after Trump. They particularly gone after Manchin and Cinema. I just think that they really need to come down to the table and say, how can we help the American people get what they want? A
Mm-hmm.
vast majority of them want this Build Back Better bill passed. That is a lot of bees. For someone with a speak impediment, that is a very hard bill to pronounce very fast. A majority of Americans want the Build Back Better bill passed. And when you have people refusing to compromise, it makes it very difficult. And like I said, they need to sit down and say, how can we do this? No, it's not going to be 3.5 trillion. We basically know that at this point. And Biden's agreed to go down to 2 trillion, maybe lower, but they would need to have talks before. And they've had them, but not much progress has been made. This reconciliation has really helped Democrats because we know that Republicans are just the party of no at this point. They're not going to vote for anything that the Biden agenda stands for, let alone something that would make Biden look good nationally. Something that he could say, I passed this during my term during his reelection campaign. We know Republicans don't want to do that. So this reconciliation is basically a lifesaver for Democrats. But it all goes down to what Krista Sinema and Joe Manchin want to do. Like I said, they have
And
all the cards.
frankly, yeah. And frankly, is there anything going to be passed, especially with Krista Cinema, as you were talking about earlier?
There are certain things that
Oh
she's
well.
voted
Well,
for, like she's she's one of the big opposers of removing the filibuster, just like Joe Manchin. And a lot of the major things, the more nuclear things, I guess you could call it, that the Biden administration wants to get done, she's been opposed to it, just like Joe Manchin has been opposed to it. She thinks that coming from
yeah,
Arizona, she has to be a moderate. That is a traditionally conservative state. But times are changing, and she needs to understand that. Of course, we're diving a little deeper
yeah,
into just her particularly, but I
yeah.
think that's important to know that she comes from Arizona, yes. And there is already major primary opposition to her in 2024 for her reelection campaign, assuming she runs. Or she might have already announced it, I'm not sure, but I would assume she runs again. And because she has a really low approval rating in Arizona. Republicans hate her because she's a Democrat. Democrats hate her because she votes against all the things that Democrats support. So obviously, so she's
Find your
going to have very
ground.
low approval ratings, and she's going to have a major primary opposition. I don't really get why she's being so careful coming from a state like Arizona. Mark Kelly, another Democrat from Arizona, is not treading just around Arizona thinking, oh, it's this conservative state. Yes, traditionally it has been, but not anymore, really. It voted for Biden. It was close in 2016 on an election that Democrats lost. They have two Democrat senators. They have a Secretary of State that is a Democrat. So obviously they can elect Democrats. So they're not that conservative anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that. Joe
So
Manchin makes more sense. He comes from West Virginia, one of the most conservative states in the Union. You have Wyoming and then you have West Virginia. Two very conservative states, West Virginia just coming straight after Wyoming in terms of how much they went to Trump in 2020. It went more to Trump than Oklahoma did. That is a lot. And the fact that Joe Manchin can win statewide races still in 2018, his last reelection campaign, it's kind of crazy. But that's because he's known for being this moderate candidate. And Joe Manchin has to continue playing that role as a moderate candidate if he has any chance of winning in 2024. So I get why he's playing it safe by being a moderate. Krista Sinema, I don't get it really. Krista Sinema from Arizona, not a very conservative state, more moderate, but thinking that they're a Democrat, people elected her to vote like a Democrat. Joe Manchin, on the other hand, they elected him
yeah,
to be a staunch opposition to when he was first elected to the Obama agenda and now the Biden agenda. Coming from West Virginia, that makes sense. But like I said, Arizona, not so much. And I think because this episode's getting a little longer, we're going to talk about the next one that we're going to, or next segment
hmm
that we'll be talking about, and this is about redistricting. 4 states have already finished their redistricting. This would include Oregon, Indiana, what were the other ones? Nebraska, and there was one more. I lost it. There's one more. I'll think of it. Nebraska. I said that. Nebraska,
Indiana. No,
Oregon.
did you say
Oh,
that?
Maine. Maine was the last one. So those 4 states have been confirmed, signed by the
hmm
governor if it needed to be, voted by the state legislators, and is now official. States like Texas, New York, and most states at this point have had maps that have been voted on or have maps. Not most states have not voted on it already. However, most states have maps up for the public to see of what could happen in those states. But I think it's very interesting to look at the Indiana results, or not really results, but what the state house and the state senate decided to vote on, because it really shows you, like Indiana, it's controlled by Republicans. It shows you how Republicans are trying to gerrymander and what their goals with gerrymandering are this redistricting year. Back in 2010, what Republicans did was they funded many cheap statewide, not statewide, small state legislative races, small state house races, state senate races to give Republicans majority throughout state legislators across the country. And then what these state legislators did was they were able to vote for a new congressional map. And then that helped Republicans big time.
Hmm.
It helped them the again in their state senate and the state house, but more importantly, the congressional elections for the United States Congress. And that's why they were able to, not only because of the red wave year from Obama's first 2 years, but also because of gerrymandering. Democrats tried to do a similar thing in 2020, funding smaller races that would help them later with redistricting. However, it didn't really work. So you have these races, and we'll go back to Indiana in just a minute. And that is, like I said, this is a big reason why Republicans control most state legislators in the country. It's because Republicans fund these
Hmm.
small races so they can
Yeah.
control redistricting processes and stuff like that. Indiana specifically, what they have done is
Yeah.
they were two safe Democrat districts in that state. All the other districts in the state were safe Republican except one that was a battleground. Now there's two safe Democrats, and every single one is a Republican. There's no battleground district anymore. That shows you what Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to remove the competitive districts out of their state, basically giving them a free race, which makes sense why they want to do that. However, it's not very fair to people's votes. You're putting them in a district to force them to vote a certain way, practically, which it's not very fair.
Yeah. And this is another reason why we think this the house races will be a bit different this year, is because of just a lot of these states are battlegrounds. Pardon me for saying so many times, but these states are important, and they have not been totally all the time battleground states, but a lot of these states, especially like Indiana, where a few battleground races could change the difference, means a lot. And this could definitely change the upcoming election, especially with all this
Well, I kind of actually disagree
battleground
there because
nonsense.
what Florida, they're gaining an electoral vote, meaning they're going to gain a congressional district. Texas, again, is also gaining House districts. Those districts alone, being drawn by Republican legislators, we kind of know they're going to go to Republicans. That alone basically gives Republicans a majority. So I don't think one race in Indiana is going
Mhm.
to decide the majority.
But no, I'm not saying this is going to be the oh my god, this is the eye on the world. No, I'm just saying it makes the lines a bit more clear. And that's something to take further point of when referring
Another reason I say
to
it's
these
not going to
upcoming
matter that much is
2022
because that
elections.
competitive district has a Republican. Do you think a Democrat, even regardless of what they drew in Indiana, regardless if it was the same map, do you think a incumbent Republican on a red wave year in a competitive district, a Democrat could beat that person? I highly doubt it. So I don't really think redistricting here really mattered in terms
No.
of overall national for election results terms. It's not very important. Why I'm saying it's important, it really shows you
Mhm.
what in other states that could matter at a larger degree, because they either have more congressional races or more traditionally competitive races that might not be as competitive after the redistricting results come in. That's what I'm saying, and that's why I'm saying that Indiana is an
Yep.
important for us to look at to see what could be coming in the future.
It is a very good mirror
And I
state.
think
I
we'll be
agree with
moving
you
on
on
to our
that
next
front.
segment, and this is an update about the debt ceiling. We'll do a short little summary, and we'll get over with the story pretty quickly because our last 2 points are pretty short. Basically, we'll run down this real quickly. Last week, we talked about the debt ceiling, how if it wasn't voted on by that Thursday night that we recorded our weekly news, the government would be shut down. The Senate passed a temporary measure that the House later voted on and Biden signed that would basically save the government up until December or something. It was early December. That's not very good. It's supposed to last
Yep.
much longer, but of course, it's a temporary measure. So the two options Democrats have here is either A, get rid of the filibuster, which is not going to happen because that's a nuclear option, and Manchin and Cinema that we talked about before are not going to budge on that. B, use
And even if they did have the political support to do that, that would take
well,
way too
not
much time to
necessarily.
fix them.
You could do that in within 2 months, but it would be a squeeze. Yeah, reconciliation would be B. That would be your B option. The reason Democrats don't really want to do that is because they don't want to look like the
Which
party
we've discussed
that
earlier.
is spending all the money, and they want to look like raising the debt ceiling is a bipartisan effort. If you use reconciliation, basically means that Democrats are doing this all on their own, no Republican support needed, and it really doesn't look very good on Democrats, and it makes sense.
But if you look at the alternative, it also means that while Democrats are trying and pushing so hard to work to fix the debt ceiling crisis, it really it's really all about perspective. Are the American people going to look at it as, wow, the Democrats are doing everything to keep our government running so that we can function as a society? Or are they going to look at it like what you think might happen of, oh, look at the
No, it's
Democrats
going to look
trying to
like that,
spend
though,
more money?
because
It's
the
really all about
media in this
perspective. And we
country
went
is just
into,
so rigged. That's probably the wrong word to use. But if you are a conservative, you are watching Fox News, it's going to look like Democrats are being crazy. If you are a liberal, you're going to be watching MSNBC. You're going to be watching more left wing news sources, and it's going to look like Democrats are doing the right thing. So I just don't think that the American people as a
yeah,
whole are
and
going to
that's what I'm
say
trying to
Democrats are
communicate.
doing the right thing. It's all because of media coverage.
Yeah, it's that's that's why I said it's all about perspective. Which American people are going to think this?
It's all the
Why are they
optics.
going to
It's
think
literally
that?
just
Who are
optics,
they
and none
with?
of
Who's
the
supporting
two I
who?
mentioned with the filibuster and the reconciliation
Exactly.
um, way that you could do it. None of those are good options. The third option is just get Republicans to work with you, which is also probably not going to happen.
No,
How's that a nuclear option?
that's a nuclear option.
No, that would mean like major. Okay,
It's
you do not know
impossible.
what nuclear options mean. Okay, that would not be a major
Major
change. What are you
change.
talking
Yeah, yeah,
about?
yeah. I get it.
Getting Republicans to work.
If you're going to get
Okay,
Republicans to
moving
work,
on. You're being stupid.
getting
Okay, so
getting Republicans getting Republicans, if you get Republican support to do anything, you might as, which they're not, you might as well just change the filibuster for all you care.
it's
Whoever
still not a
cares?
nuclear option.
You're not going to
Okay,
get that
so we're
support.
moving on to
It's
our
never going to
last
happen.
segment, and we're going to be talking about
Huh?
abortion, which I believe was 2 weeks ago. Texas put into effect an abortion ban. It's not really a ban, but practically it is. If you have been pregnant for over 6 weeks, you are unable to get an abortion, and an abortion kills the baby. A federal judge in Texas has blocked it. There will probably be an appeal by the governor to basically retract that ruling with that federal judge, which basically what happened is the DOJ, the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, sued Texas over the merits of this abortion ban, saying that it was unconstitutional. And then that federal judge sided with the federal government, the Department of Justice, or Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. And like I said, there will probably be a repeal by the governor, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yep.
Temporarily, right now, people can get abortions in Texas because this law cannot be enforced temporarily because it's been blocked by this federal judge that is basically ruling over the state of Texas. However, the Supreme Court has still refused to step in, saying um,
Is
that they can't block it because they have, believe it, just four justices that have said it's constitutional, and they're not going to be enforcing Roe v. Wade, which is a major problem. Even you have the Chief Justice of all people that have sided with liberals. Sorry, it is not four; it's five. It's 5-4 because there was 9 justices. And I think that's kind of interesting. We talked about this before,
mm-hmm.
so we're not going to go too in depth with this. However, I think it's important to give y'all an update about
Yep.
what's happening with abortion.
But it is a bit eerie that the
No, they're not
Supreme
going to do
Court has yet
anything
to do anything, but it's all
because
time will tell.
there's three out of the
They're not going to
five
do
people
anything.
right now that are basically taking away the ability to get an abortion in Texas. Not really right now, but assuming there's an appeal in Texas and it goes through like it did with Florida and their ban on mask mandates, there will be 3 out of the 5 people that are blocking it will be appointed by Trump in one term, which is just insane to think about, but that is the reality. But I think we're going to wrap up this episode. I'm not sure how long it's been going on, probably,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 36 minutes, almost 37 minutes. So, anyways, thank you for
Too long.
listening. Make sure to tune in next Tuesday for our next topic video. Thank you for watching.